Happy New Year, guys! It's 2019, we're a couple days into the new year, and here I am talking about the movies of 2018. If you're new to this channel, what I do at the end of every year before I do my best of and worst of list is I give out micro reviews to movies that I saw in the previous year, but just didn't have time to give full reviews of. And most of the time they're movies that came out during the last 2 months of the year, like November and December, because there are just so many movies coming out for award season. I just don't have time to get to all of them. So that's what I'm gonna do here. There are a handful of movies that I saw this year that I just didn't have time to review, or in some instances, I thought I recorded a review for it, but that file for some reason mysteriously either gets corrupted, goes missing, or it could have been one of those moments where I was sitting in front of the camera talking about the movie and realized that I did not hit the record button. So I was just discouraged from doing it all over again. But whatever, that's what this video is for. So I'm just gonna give very quick and straight to the point reviews, almost like I'm doing Stardust reactions, where I don't talk about the plot, I just get straight to the point, talk about what I liked, didn't like, and give you an overall rating. So let's start off with one of the worst movies I've seen last year, Winchester. Great note to start on. So this is a horror movie starring Jason Clarke and Helen Mirren. And I say it's one of the worst movies of the year for a couple reasons. Well, for one, this is a movie where I fell asleep. Twice. When I saw Proud Mary, I fell asleep and hated myself for doing that. I don't like to fall asleep during movies, but this movie was just so boring that I managed to fall asleep twice. It's never suspenseful at all, and what scares they try to give you are some of the cheapest jump scares I've ever seen in any horror movie. I've never seen a horror movie do this where they get jump scares out of you by people opening doors. They do this about 3 times. By the 3rd time, I seriously wanted to walk out, but I guess instead of walking out, I got 2 good naps from it. So, yeah, it's not good. The performances aren't very good. Jason Clarke is meh. Helen Mirren is well above this kind of movie. And the ending is just ludicrous. Not as ludicrous as in Insidious 4, but still pretty dumb. Don't waste your money on this. So that movie came out in February, and for most of the year, I've been pretty good at reviewing every movie that I've seen, so we're gonna jump all the way into September talking about another horror movie that people seem to love, The Nun. And that was supposed to be sarcasm because nobody really likes this movie. Now, when I mentioned earlier that there were a couple movies that I thought I did reviews for but didn't, Winchester and The Nun are those 2 movies. People really didn't like this movie. They were saying how terrible it was awful. I didn't hate it. I just thought it was okay. It does suffer from the same problem that Winchester did, where it's just too many jump scares, but what this movie does better than Winchester is atmosphere, and the production design here is outstanding. There are a few moments in this movie where I actually was legitimately scared, but it just doesn't hold a candle to the Conjuring movies at all. I might say something controversial about this movie, but I actually think this is the best Conjuring spin-off that they've done. I didn't see the first Annabelle, which apparently a lot of people are saying that this is better by default, but I really did not like Annabelle Creation. I thought that was just infinitely worse than this movie here. And also, I gotta say this. Was I the only person who thought that Taissa Farmiga was playing the younger version of Vera Farmiga's character in the Conjuring movies? Because the 2 actresses are sisters, they look very similar to each other, so I just assumed that Taissa was playing the same character as her older sister. But I guess not. It took me about 30 minutes to realize that this wasn't the same character. So, it's okay, not much else to say. Watch at your own risk. Next up, we have The Hate U Give, and out of all the movies I'm going to talk about in this video, this is the one where I regret not doing a full review to it, because this is in my top 3 of favorite movies of the year. It is that good. And the real sad thing about it is that no one's really talking about it. I don't think it got any recognition at the Golden Globes. I don't even know if it's getting any award recognition at all, but it's such a powerful movie. It's honestly kind of hard to sit through. This movie felt very real, the characters felt real, the situations felt very real and haunting. And the lead actress in this movie, Amandla Stenberg, is so good that she has redeemed herself from Darkest Minds. Like I said, it's in my top 3 favorite movies. It's emotionally gripping, it feels very real, and even though it's a rough watch, it will leave you with some sort of optimism in the end. Again, one of my favorite movies of the year. Get off your ass and go see it right now. Next up, we have Mary Queen of Scots, which stars Saoirse Ronan as the title character and Margaret Robbie as Queen Elizabeth. And this was a movie that I just thought was okay. I had originally planned to do a full review on it, but when I really thought about the movie, I just didn't have a lot to say about it. It's kind of a mess when you get right down to it. The movie is directed like it's some sort of stage play because all the characters stay within one location for most of the time. In fact, the director of this movie actually originated from a theater background, which actually makes a lot of sense. Your two lead actresses are really good. Saoirse Ronan's great and Margaret Robbie's good as well, but they don't spend that much time together. This is a movie where it's supposed to be about the relationship between these two women, and most of the time you're watching it, you'll forget that Margaret Robbie's in the movie because she has a very limited amount of screen time, and it's mostly about Saoirse Ronan. You have other good actors in this movie that are kind of wasted. Guy Pearce is in this, who's unrecognizable, and David Tennant just pops in and out of nowhere just whenever it's convenient for the plot, and the ending is just kind of lazy. So it's not a terrible movie. I wouldn't even say it's a bad movie. It's just okay. Watch at your own risk. Next up is a movie that I really did not think I would like at all, but I really liked it, and that's Green Book. The reason I felt like I wasn't going to like this movie when it first came out is because when I watched the trailers or I read the descriptions of this movie, I kept thinking of The Blind Side, which I hate. Because The Blind Side is supposed to be the story of this athlete in his younger life, but instead it decides to tell the entire movie from Sandra Bullock's perspective, and how great she is, and how this athlete at a young age is incapable of taking care of himself. This movie here, Green Book, is not like that. It focuses on Don Shirley and the friendship that he develops with his bouncer, played by Viggo Mortensen. And Don Shirley is played by Mahershala Ali. And the friendship between these two characters is really convincing. Both actors give a terrific performance. Viggo Mortensen is really funny in this movie, and Mahershala Ali is great as well. And if you want to know how great of an actor Mahershala Ali is, watch how he plays Don Shirley in Green Book, and then listen to how he plays the Prowler in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. You would not be able to tell that it's the same actor because the voices are just so different. The biggest shocker of this movie to me is that it was directed by one half of the Farley brothers, Peter Farley, who I thought was in director jail after he did a few segments in movie 43, but hey, proved himself, and this is a great movie. Not one of my top 10 of the year, but definitely would be in my top 20. Worth seeing in your lifetime. Next up, we have Stan and Ollie, which stars Steve Coogan as Stan Laurel and John C. Reilly as Oliver Hardy. Let me first say this. When it comes to comedy within the golden age of Hollywood, I've always been more of a Three Stooges kind of person. Didn't really see that much of Laurel and Hardy, but I recognize those faces. I recognize the sketches of their faces. So I definitely have a frame of reference of who these guys are. And this movie, while it's not a full biopic of how they met and their careers, it focuses more on their comeback tour in the UK and how their friendship just kind of hits a bunch of struggles. And it's really compelling to watch. When the movie first starts, I really wasn't sure how to take it because I was expecting a full-on biography, but as the movie went on and you really see what the movie was trying to say about these two guys, I really dug it a lot. Steve Coogan's great, the dynamic he has with John C. Reilly's fantastic, and John C. Reilly himself is fantastic as well. The screening that I went to had a Q&A afterwards with John C. Reilly, and during that Q&A he was talking about how he grew up with Laurel and Hardy and how much the two guys were comedic geniuses, and you can tell in his performance that he really loves these two guys. And the makeup job on John C. Reilly is so good that it stacks up there with when Gary Oldman played Winston Churchill in The Darkest Hours. It's a very charming movie about the later years of this duo's friendship, and it's worth seeing in your lifetime, especially if you're a fan of Laurel and Hardy. And if nothing else, this is the best of two movies that John C. Reilly and Steve Coogan starred in together. I'll talk about the other one a little later. Next up is the Polish movie Cold War, which I didn't know anything about until my dad started talking about this and telling me how it's one of the best movies he's seen in years, maybe decades, and he even threatened to never speak to me again if I didn't see this movie. So I ended up seeing it, and it was good. I think I might have been a little disappointed when I first saw it because my dad was overselling it to an nth degree. However, the more I thought about this movie, the more I really started to appreciate it. It's such a well-crafted film. It feels like an old foreign film from the 60s, to the point where it's even filmed in full screen, it's shot in black and white, and it's surprisingly short. In a way, it's kind of the foreign version of A Star is Born because it deals with the relationship between this teacher and this young student who ends up becoming a singer. And the teacher pretty much ends up spiraling out of control the older he gets on and the further this young student's star power grows. It's so well crafted, it's straight to the point with what it's trying to say. My only big problem with the movie is that the name of the movie, Cold War, is just kind of dumb because it takes place during the Cold War, but really has nothing to do with it. It's a film that I think is worth seeing in your lifetime, especially if you're into these kinds of foreign films. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if the Criterion Collection picked this up and released it at some point in the future. And this would be my pick for Best Foreign Film if it wasn't for the next movie I'm going to talk about, which is Alfonso Cuarón's Roma. This is the very last movie I saw of 2018, and I'd say it was definitely a great way to end it because I love Alfonso Cuarón. He's one of my favorite directors out there because of stuff like Gravity, Children of Men, and in my opinion, the best Harry Potter film ever made, The Prisoner of Azkaban. Roma is actually kind of a hard movie to describe because nothing really happens. And when I say nothing happens, I mean more like in the sense of when you watch Boyhood. When you watch Boyhood, it really doesn't have a plot, and it's just following the life of this boy who ends up becoming a teenager. And in Roma, it pretty much tells the story of this stay-at-home maid who lives with this middle-class family in Mexico City. And it's supposed to be based off his childhood while growing up in Mexico City. The characters feel very real, the situations feel very natural. There are some moments in the movie that are too real that it's kind of hard to watch. The performances are great. The cinematography, which Cuarón did himself, is outstanding. It has kind of a documentary style to it. It's filmed in gorgeous black and white. In fact, I don't even think this movie and Cold War would have been as great as they are if they were in color. The black and white cinematography just adds a level of charm to it. I guess the only problem is that you don't get to see Alfonso Cuarón's trademark green anywhere because Alfonso Cuarón just loves to fill his movies with green. But still, it's an amazing movie and continues to prove that Cuarón is one of my favorite directors out there. Worth seeing in your lifetime, almost on the verge of saying get off your ass and go see it right now. Next up, we have the latest political comedy drama from Adam McKay, Vice. So Adam McKay started off doing Will Ferrell stuff like Anchorman, and then he really made a name for himself with The Big Short, which was about the 2008 recession and how we got into that mess to begin with. And I'm going to say something controversial. I don't like The Big Short. It's a well-made movie, no question about it. You guys can call me stupid all you want, but for a movie that was supposed to explain how we got into the recession to begin with, it just left me with more questions than answers. So I didn't really know what to think of Vice when it actually came out, but I liked it. The movie is a mess, however. The first half of the movie kind of plays like a typical biography of Dick Cheney, and I actually learned some stuff. Like, I didn't know he was just a drunken asshole. I didn't know he was working in the Nixon administration, and to be honest, given his political views, I had no idea that he was okay with his daughter being a lesbian. So there are definitely a few moments where they try to humanize Dick Cheney to the point where he doesn't seem like a bad guy. Then we get to the second half of the movie, which I think is better, but you remember that, yeah, Dick Cheney is a scumbag. How did he become our vice president? How did we get into this mess to begin with? I'm not going to go into that full rant, but I will say that Christian Bale as Dick Cheney is incredible. He is undoubtedly going to get an Academy Award nomination, and if there's no one better than him, he should win because he is that good and really proves that he can transform himself as an actor. You got some other good people in here like Tyler Perry as Colin Powell, which is a weird choice, but I think he was good. My second favorite actor in the movie was Sam Rockwell as George W. Bush. But as for Steve Carell as Donald Rumsfeld, all I could see was Steve Carell acting like Michael from The Office. I didn't really see him as Donald Rumsfeld. So yeah, that's all I have to say about Vice. It is good, but I don't think it's great. And the last movie I'm going to talk about in this video is one of the other worst movies of the year, Holmes and Watson. Funny, I start this video talking about one of the worst of the year, and I'm ending it with one of the worst of the year. This was a movie, in fact, that I had to see just to see if it would qualify for my worst of the year list, to see if it was really as bad as people are saying it is. And holy shit. Yeah, it's bad. It is undoubtedly the worst Will Ferrell comedy out there. And it also happens to be the second movie that John C. Reilly and Steve Coogan star in together. Steve Coogan has a very small role in this movie, and he's one of the better parts. John C. Reilly is trying to do the best with his material here. Rhys Ifans as Moriarty is just completely wasted. And Rebecca Hall throughout this entire movie has this look of, I'm just gonna get through this, collect my paycheck, but I really don't want to be here. And I single her out because I think Rebecca Hall is an incredibly underrated actress and should get more work. The one who really ruins the movie for me is Will Ferrell, because he, at this point, is the new Adam Sandler. He thinks he can make any kind of movie and people will see it because he's Will Ferrell. And throughout this whole movie, he does what Mike Myers does, where he kind of gives him a congratulatory pat on the back, like, yeah, I know I've got another hit on my hands. The jokes fall flat. It's historically inaccurate. Even though Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character, they bring in elements from history that just don't belong in Sherlock Holmes. They reference Donald Trump for no reason at all. It's sexist. I never thought that a Will Ferrell movie could ever be sexist, but hey, here we are. And it just made me sad watching it, because I've loved a lot of Will Ferrell movies back when I was growing up, and this just sucks. It never made me angry, but it just made me feel sad watching it. But there you go. Those are the rest of the movies that I saw in 2018, but just didn't have time to do full reviews of. And this might be the very last time I do this, because with apps like Stardust out there, I now can do micro reviews for any movie I see as soon as I finish watching it. So in the future, if there are any movies that I saw in 2019 but didn't review on YouTube, just go check them out on Stardust, because chances are I've reviewed them there. So next up will be my best of and worst of lists of 2018, but first I want to hear what you guys thought about these movies that I talked about. Did you like any of them? Did you dislike any of them? Are any of these movies that I talked about going to be on your own best of or worst of? Let me know in the comments down below, and until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.